Plattsburgh Mayor Jim Calnon joins us at the roundtable this week. Welcome, nice to see you.
Glad to be here, Tom.
Happy New Year to you.
And right to you.
Just a few moments ago, we heard about city councilors this past week giving the green light for the development of the new marina at Duck Street Landing down on Lake Champlain. Is this a pretty major deal for the city?
Oh, I think it's a huge deal. You know, I was very disappointed last year that it didn't go through. I think that one of the really good things is over the last 12 months, we've really improved the project itself. And while we missed a season, I think it's going to be worth it in the end because we were really going to have a really high-class operation that I think is going to be very impressive.
So teaming up with this company, Nav Tours, out of Montreal, what are they going to offer and do for the city that's so attractive?
Well, they're doing a couple things for us. One, they obviously market their rentals worldwide. We will be part of their marketing package. The other thing they're going to do is they're actually going to provide our on-the-dock help. Really an important piece of this because they're going to be offering us bilingual people and really at a number of hours that would be difficult for us to afford. And the fact that we're kind of sharing the expense of those people really makes it a great deal for both of us.
No restaurant at the location like there used to be a few years ago. No fuel offered, right. So you're not competing with the Plattsburgh Boat Basin right next door.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, I think that, the way I characterize it is they're the shopping mall and we're just the exit off the interstate. Really, we're just trying to, provide a parking lot, provide a place where people can come to Plattsburgh and really connect with not just the Turtle in the boat basin, but the rest of downtown as well.
What is the hope that it will do for the downtown and for the city?
Oh, we think that we're going to increase traffic considerably. We've spent a lot of time over the last year talking to folks around the lake, in particular our counterparts in Burlington, who really have given us just phenomenal advice on where to go. And one of the things that they tell us is the people who are docking at their docks are looking for other destinations. And they really are pleased that we're providing one.
No hotel is part of this.
Not at this point. Well, build the destination first, and let's see what happens. It's the same thing's true with the restaurant. I actually did get a call as soon as the news broke that it was going to be on the agenda from an individual who had a particular idea that he wanted to put in for food. And I said, wait, let's walk before we run. Let's really get the basic marina established. The building will be renovated a little bit later this year. We did the cleanup of the results of the 2011 flood. Mm-hmm. So we'll be doing some renovations on the building probably late February into March. And so we'll start there. The kitchen area that hasn't been touched yet, we're leaving that alone, see what happens as we go forward. But it really is about let's first provide the first step.
That building there had a number of mold issues after the flooding from 2011.
Yeah, the flooding wasn't all that serious. The high water mark inside the building was probably about 3 inches. But because we were so busy doing everything else we were doing during the flood, we didn't get to it quickly enough so that once mold develops, it's a pretty serious situation. And so we took care of all the mold. We were very pleased that it didn't get into the insulation, didn't get into the wood. So it really was mostly a sheetrock issue, and that's always makes it a lot easier to deal with.
And you talk about one step at a time. Obviously, for a lot of people, that hotel project has been sort of one that's been out there for so many years now that there was great hope that it might be built down there on the waterfront, and obviously hasn't come to fruition yet. Long range, do you think that's something that's among the goals for the city?
Oh, I think definitely developing that area is clearly one of our goals. One of the issues that kind of behind the scenes is that the contract that we had with the developer was one that was not easy for us to get out of, and in fact we're not out of it yet. We think that that'll happen in the course of the next couple of months, and then we can look at other uses for the property. But until that happens, we can't even really talk about it. Hotel is definitely a possibility. We've heard some tourism ideas, Old Plattsburgh, for example, or recreational centers, lots of conversations. And one of the really nice things is we're now involved in several projects where we're starting to get and revisit public input on what kinds of things will do well at the beach, what should happen down there, what might happen downtown in the Durkee Street area. So we're overall trying to come up with a development plan that will incorporate all the ideas someplace. And the Saranac Street property that NYSEG is still using to clean up eventually is going to be available. We should be talking about how does that fit into the overall pattern of downtown activities.
That's the old coal tar plant that along the banks of the Saranac River. Work still going on, cleaning that up several years now, and eventually the plan is to put a footbridge across there, connect the downtown to the Saranac River Trail.
Yes, and I think the other part of it is, of course, anytime there's a cleanup site, use is restricted. I mean, they won't let you have any, you know, like first floor residences and stuff in case there's anything they missed, although with the thoroughness of this cleanup, I can't imagine there's anything they've missed. But what is the proper use for? You know, the trail will go along the river edge, but then there's a rather large field. Might be a recreational piece, it might be retail, might be lots of things. But the bridge, which you hope gets built actually this year, will you know, make a broad use of that pretty possible.
Looking at your accomplishments for the past year, your first year in office, what would be some of the highlights?
One of the things that really was a huge challenge for us over the last, I've been on the council now 7 years before being mayor for one.
True.
And you know, we went through some really difficult economic times. And we were very afraid that 2015 had the potential to be a very bad year. We knew that 16 offered some hope. You know, there's a lot of things that we could do. So I think, you know, getting a budget that we think is you know, systemically balanced is important. A really big step, a difficult thing to do, but we're there at this point. We'll be revisiting our budget again, starting really at around the 1st of February, to be sure that it's as good as it looked going in. Because it's kind of on the edge of danger. But that's, I think, one of the first best things is we really have to look at doing the number one job, which is to, you know, respect the taxpayers' money and move from there. At the same time, it's important for us to really kind of plan for the future and really start to do things that I think present a different image. You know, the nation really suffered from a pretty serious recession. We're not out of it yet in terms of employment. There was an editorial in the newspaper a week or so ago that talked about the fact that, well, the rate's coming down, the jobs aren't back yet. You know, some people are just discouraged from looking. So getting the jobs back is a big part of that. And what's our role in that? How do we you know, get involved in that? And so we look at things like making the city a more attractive place for living, working, visiting, and North Margaret Street. You know, the restriping of North Margaret Street that really presents a whole different feeling for the city when you enter was a really big thing, and I celebrate that for a lot of reasons. One, just because it is a very positive change, but also because it didn't start in the council chambers. It started somewhere else and was brought to us. And you know, we were able to find a way to accomplish the vision of the folks that came up with the idea. Great way for democracy to work. Drivers
adjusted pretty quickly. It's a lot safer for pedestrians and for bicyclists, and it really upgraded that stretch of
and I think, you know,
Street.
I mean, one of the nice things about roads, and we've known this for a long time, if you think it's a little narrower, you slow down, and that's happened. I mean, the speeds there are, you know, much more in keeping with the limit that's been established. So that does it. Safety is improved for everybody. Plus, it is a much more positive look as you come down Route 9.
And as you head out to City Beach, and over the past year, really, you've taken steps with the town of Plattsburgh to work on a new era of cooperation, to work on a number of projects together, possibly shared services, but also looking at developing City Beach in that area together.
Yeah, one of the nice things is that our recreation departments have worked well together. Actually, many of our departments, town and city, have worked together well below the radar. We've, over the last year, really been trying to raise the visibility of that. One of the examples is that recreation did a survey of what do people want, and it was sponsored by both the town and the city, and will benefit both of us. So we are having conversations about how do we then take the results of that survey and develop either facilities or programs that people are looking for, and how do we do that cooperatively? It just makes sense.
And beyond that, the City Beach is really the crown jewel for the city and for the town. The hope is to develop that down the road. A number of proposals out there, but that's still a few years off as far as coming up both with the money and the plans to develop that out there.
Coming up with the money is always a few years off. That's a difficult thing. But one of the things that's a part of the planning process that we're in right now with a visioning project that will probably start public meetings in another month or so. Is we're really studying the Crate Center and to see, what's the highest and best use of that building or that property. Mm-hmm. Is it economically feasible to change it or replace it? Lots of big decisions. And then one of the other nice things is this year we were actually able to get a couple of grants from the Regional Economic Development Council, which again will help us plan better for the future, better way to look at some of the beach options, some of the downtown options. So I think we're on a bit of a growth start at this point. We're going to start looking pretty heavily for the money, but the marina is a good example. We did get a $100,000 boating infrastructure grant. It is 10 or 15% of the project cost, which is great. But it also means that if we look at expanding the marina at some point in the future, we've already got our foot in the door for a really important funding source if we try to expand. Yeah. So.
The Chamber of Commerce has done a study on the city beach area, a destination master plan, worked with developers mm-hmm. or basically strategists on how to develop that. A few others, business people in the community, have come up with some plans that include everything from restaurants and piers and amphitheaters and everything. So some grand ideas out there, but many of them are still years down the road.
Well, but just like the marina conversation, it's one step at a time. We've already done a number of things. We took advantage of the assistance that we got after the flooding did its damage at the beach in 11 to make some changes, to really make some positive changes. A good example is, we replaced the old pipe fence with mm-hmm. rope and posts that just, much more appropriate for the setting. It looks a lot better. We've enhanced the picnic tables in that area. We're looking at improving even more the accessibility of the beach to folks with limited mobility. Those are the kinds of things that we've been able to do so far on just little money.
And it's paying off. The numbers.
It's definitely paying off.
Attendance at the beach has been going up and up.
Yeah, and weather certainly plays a role in that, but I think what you get when you get there is another piece of it. So I think what we'll probably see in 2015 is a step in the right direction. A good example is we have an old bathhouse that really needs to be redone. One of the things that we'll be asking folks about as we go forward is what's the highest and best use of that building? Certainly you need the bathroom facilities, but is it a spot for a restaurant? Is it a spot for some other retail? Is it those are the kinds of questions that we think we can look at. And if you start to think about it, if you look back, you mentioned one of the plans that was out there had a pier. And the pier on the diagram was almost right in front of that bathhouse. So as you start to think about things, well, you're not wasting effort if you put some money into this building because it will then be the landside anchor for whatever goes on out at the pier. So we're trying to do things in a measured fashion so that we don't have to spend money twice. And planning is the biggest part of that.
You had a day at the beach back in September where with the town you held a day to solicit ideas from folks. And that was, again, a joint effort between the town of Plattsburgh, Clinton County Legislature, and also the city of Plattsburgh. Do you see in the months and years to come a lot more cooperation with the town, a lot more shared services, possible consolidation?
Consolidation, probably not. I mean, there's reasons why there are separate governments and separate boundaries, but clearly lots and lots of cooperation. And really should add that there's another partner at the table too. We had one discussion where we brought in the folks from the state beach. Mm-hmm. Again, it's
right next door.
The customers don't know whose sand they're walking on, and we just had some preliminary discussions about how we can do things better together. Example is they have a very successful campground. We therefore shouldn't build a campground, but we might be providing services that their campers want to participate in. And let's start to communicate that. Maybe one of the ideas that was out there was some sort of a stage and do some concerts and those kinds of things. Well, let's be sure that our partners at the state are involved in at least the planning and information piece of that, and then everybody grow. Everybody gets a chance to grow. So.
You mentioned the flood damage from 2011 at the beach. Just down from the beach, Lakeside Apartments is kind of an eyesore for the city. Abandoned apartment complex, heavily damaged during the flooding of 2011. You've been working with the owner, the developer from Montreal. Are you hopeful that in the coming months something will happen with that property?
Oh, I certainly am. We met with the owner in late spring and suggested that he told us that they plan to have a plan to either redevelop or sell or do something by really the end of the summer. That didn't materialize, and so we've been in some communication with him. It's a little difficult to get some of the things we need to do, but there's been some changes in the property. The property for a long time was very well secured. While ugly and needing service, it really met all the codes that were out there. And that's an important thing. I mean, the thing that prevents me from coming into your house and telling you what color to paint it, really kind of protect the property rights of people who pay their taxes and maintain the properties at least in a safe condition. That's changed. We're finding doors that are not secured anymore. We're finding other violations. And so we're at a point now where we're going to start citing those violations. And while it sounds kind of weak, every door is a separate violation and every day is a separate violation. And after a while, it can, fines can get to be real money. One of our constraints is we understand that the property may have changed hands. The deed has not been filed yet, so we're not quite sure who to write the ticket to. But we're on this absolutely as much as we possibly can be, as much as the law allows us. A day doesn't go by that we don't consider some action or have some discussion about what can we do next. It is a huge priority. I joked last week that if we could tear it down and build something new, the day they cut the ribbons, the day I should retire, because what better thing could I accomplish? It is clearly one of our priorities. We have to tread carefully, but we are going to be relentless.
And the hope is the violations will get the owners, whoever they are, to do something. Any indication from them whether they look to put apartments back in there or develop it commercially?
Actually, the discussion that we had presented a wide variety of ideas, and that really is what they were talking about, taking the summer to decide which way to go. We have not had any of those kinds of discussions since then, so I really don't know what their plans are. I just know what ours are.
And you had talked about the work on North Margaret Street this summer. Also a lot of work, major work on South Catherine Street, and that took all summer. And you probably heard from businesses there that felt the impact this summer.
Oh, definitely. There's no question about it. The really nice thing about it, however, is that it was originally designed to be a 2-year project, and it was just about completed this year. The work that needs to be done next year does not affect the roadway much. I mean, we will probably have to restripe it. There'll be some landscaping, there'll be some other catch-up things to do, but we will not have the traffic disruption next year. So getting it all done in one season was, the best that we could do.
So painful, but you did it as quickly as possible.
It's like ripping the Band-Aid off. Let's get it done as quickly as we can, because it does hurt.
And as you look ahead now to 2015, you had mentioned obviously always the fiscal concerns in the city. What are some of the, and obviously the marina project that we talked about, what are some of the other plans that you're looking at, some of your other goals for the new year?
There are a number of things that we're planning on for the coming year. I mentioned a few of them. Obviously the marina is probably the biggest and most visible. The pedestrian bridge that we talked about earlier as well. But we're also exploring other avenues. We have a great connection to history around here. We have, so we're actually submitting some grants a little bit later this month to help enhance the Fort Brown site. Again, a critical part of the War of 1812, and I think one that deserves some attention. Really had an interesting visit there in late fall, early winter, where you get a real sense when the leaves were gone from the trees about what a strategic place it was. So we're really working hard on that, really keeping our eye on history.
Kind of a hidden gem. A lot of people probably drive right by it on U.S. Avenue and never really pay attention to it.
and there's no place to park. There's no way to get through the curb. There's no curb cut and those kinds of things. So we're looking at trying to do some things there. We're also looking at maybe some ways to sort of recreate what it looked like. Whether that's on-site or off is to be determined. But that's another avenue that we're following. Mentioning things like the Battle of Plattsburgh and the War of 1812, those events are things that are becoming more and more important for us as we go by. I mean, obviously the bicentennial of the Battle of Plattsburgh was a very big celebration this year, and a number of the leaders of that committee have said that was their goal, and now they're willing to pass the torch. And when we look at that, and we look at some of the other things that are going on, first weekends, those kinds of events, we really think that's critically important to the city. I think part of our role is to be, not just a services center, but a cultural center and a gathering center of all kinds. And so we are putting a promotions and events coordinator on staff at the end of this month, and we're really excited about the possibilities that brings in terms of just increasing traffic in the city. Again, from the water, from the land. We think that the more people we can put in really the kind of the cultural hub of the region, it will really benefit business as well as just a much nicer place to live.
And you mentioned hiring a special events coordinator, also the city looking for a director to head up the development office. And will the work there be working a lot with some of these projects like the marina, or is it more on focusing on trying to get maybe industry and jobs into the city?
It'll be a balance. I think one of the first things that we've already started to try to rebuild is, over the years we've had a number of building improvement grants and loans. I recall that when I was a student here at Plattsburgh State, City Hall Place was not a pleasant street to be on. Today, it's one of the nicest streets we have. All of the buildings are in good shape. The facades are there. The idea that a vibrant city has first floor retail and second and third story residential has really played out well. We're looking at expanding that, so we've got some grant applications in to get us some more money. That'll definitely be part of the Community Development Office's duties. We're looking at, again, the interplay of all of these other possibilities. If you sit down and you mentioned hotel near the beginning. So what is the best spot for a hotel? Would you rather have it at the beach? Would you rather have it at the airport? Would you rather have it at the marina? Would you like to have it on Saranac Street? Those are all kinds of discussions that we think the Community Development Office is going to help us focus on. We're starting to grow the staff back. We've gone from a part-time director. Later this year, we'll go to a full-time director. We'll look at adding other staff back in as the activity ramps up, particularly the grant-funded stuff.
You mentioned City Hall Place and the downtown. An idea floated several months ago, kind of looked at Burlington and said, should that idea for Church Street be looked at for Plattsburgh? Is that something you see being studied more in the coming year, or is that not really an idea that would work for the downtown?
Well, I think the idea of a downtown and having a downtown center is really critical. Does that mean you need to close a street? No, that happened to be one that worked particularly well for Burlington. I think that we can accomplish the same thing by maybe looking backwards at some plans that were floated out 10 years ago. One of the things that I have in the top drawer of my desk is a study that was done, a plan that was really done about 10 years ago that proposed a new office building at the north end of Durkee Street, which is there now, but then had grander plans for the rest of the Durkee Street parking lot area. And one of them was to take the parking area, which is all, of course, surface parking, and build a parking garage, put it in a stack rather than having it spread out, which then would free up a tremendous amount of space in the middle. And if you kind of look at the flow from the marina, Bridge Street, we're looking at possibly a kayak and boating element in the river between the two bridges. The farmers market, open space, walk through to the arts corridor. That then might be the city center piece that we're looking at. that's part of what we're studying now. It's part of what we're going to be asking people to give us input on. But I think that's a remarkably good example, because it really doesn't change anybody's business at this point. I mean, you know, back in the beginning of my experience in Plattsburgh, all of the stores on Margaret Street faced only Margaret Street. Now they face both Margaret and Durkee. But what about the businesses that are on Margaret? What if you closed Margaret? What would that do to them? Would that upset them? You know, where do their deliveries come from? We talk about second and third story residences. How does a single mom, you know, get 2 kids and the groceries in if they have to park a long way away? So we think that, or at least I think that, you know, really trying to develop the parking lot into a city center is a really good opportunity.
One of the things with the downtown is that you also have the train coming through, Amtrak, but also a lot of freight trains, and as we've seen over the past couple of years, a lot of those freight trains are hauling oil and tanker cars, and that has to be a concern, I guess, for some folks, especially who live along Miller Street and some of the areas where those train cars are passing literally feet from their homes and their front doors. Are you comfortable with what the federal government is doing as far as the regulations on the tanker cars and trying to get them more reinforced, trying to cut down on the speed of the trains? Are you satisfied with the steps being taken to try to improve the safety of these oil trains coming through?
Well, I think any steps that anyone can take to improve safety are important. It is probably not in the next few years going to be rerouted. You know, it's something that you know, why would you take a problem for me and give it to you? You know, it is an established route that will probably be here for a number of years. So I think the steps we're taking now are critically important. Certainly the hardening of the cars and that they've done is very important. But to me, the most important thing is speed. You know, I talked to George Rivers about how he felt about it.
Mayor up at Rouse's Point.
Mayor Rouse's Point. And he said he doesn't have a problem with it because they all have to slow down at the border, so they're going through Rouse's Point at 5 miles an hour. And really, if you look at the physics of it all, you know, the reason that there was such a disaster in Quebec is because they were on a hill. Speed was the reason that train derailed.
The train had no brakes and was...
Yeah, and once you know, you come to a corner at an excessive speed and you're in trouble.
The railroad is spending a lot of money to reinforce the tracks. The tanker cars, of course, aren't owned by the railroad; they're owned by the shippers, and they have assured everyone that they're using the better quality DOT 111 tanker cars.
Yeah, we watch that, and it's pretty easy to tell from when they go by, and virtually every one of the tankers that I see are the better construction.
And is the railroad better cooperating and working with first responders who might have to handle a situation with a derailment or, God forbid, a tanker spill into the Saranac River or Lake Champlain in the city of Plattsburgh?
I think we're getting decent cooperation from the railroad. And obviously, you know, they're in the railroad business. They're not in the government business, so we have slightly different priorities. But they have been good to work with, certainly. I think, you know, as we look at safety measures going forward, are there more that might be considered? Then when you start to talk about the expense, will there be some pushback? I don't know. We haven't gotten there yet. Another example is if you've ever noticed on a bridge, there's 4 rails. And that's so even if it derails from the main rail, the wheels can't run off the bridge. And that's something that we'd like to think about in areas where there's a high population, so that, you know, trains derail, and you know, that's not the problem. It's when they crash, you know, and that's really critical that we try to maintain that the stability of the cars themselves to protect people. Frankly, if you go down the tracks north of City Hall, you can almost walk down the street and touch the buildings on both sides. You're that close. So anything that happens in there affects it. We do get even some complaints about noise. I mean, the number of trains and the fact that they have to blow their horns when they get to every crossing are things that disturb the quality of life. We have looked at trying to make Plattsburgh a quiet zone at night, so that they don't have to blow the horn as much. We need to make some changes to the railroad does, some changes to some of the crossings in order to be able to make that to happen. But we're going to continue to look at that. We're going to.
And you mentioned speed. Are there ongoing meetings with the railroad or anyone where you can really drive that point home that you'd like to set limits on the speed?
We're trying to keep our communication really with the regulators who will set the speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
That's the piece. The railroad complies with the regulations that are out there. Let's get after the route rather than have to negotiate with the railroad. Let's really get at the raw limit.
Yep. So one of the other things you're looking at in the year ahead is the city charter and looking at all the codes and the zoning and everything in the city.
The city code runs to 700 pages, and it's every law that we have. The crux of it is, of course, the city charter, which is analogous to the federal constitution. It really kind of sets the parameters for what the government can do.
And the city charter probably hasn't been updated in a century.
Oh gosh, yes, it gets updated. It gets updated every now and again. For example, a few years ago, there was some ballot initiatives that would affect term limits. Well, that would have changed the charter. So those are the kinds of things that have been considered. We haven't done a really comprehensive look at it in recent memory. And so I actually, probably when I leave this discussion, I'm going to be appointing a charter commission to take a look at the entire document. There are some big pieces that are always considered. The form of government that comes up every few years. Should we have the full-time mayor's form of government we have now? Should we have a city manager? Pros and cons of that. I know it was studied probably 10 years ago with a commission that Dan Stewart appointed. Let's take a look at it. There's been a couple of discussions about the length of terms and the horror that everyone thought that the world was going to end because we had a brand new council this year. How can we turn this all over 100%? Well, we're still here, by the way. We've survived the year. But maybe staggering terms is something we should look at. That's one of the discussions. Is the current system of 6 ward councilors the way it ought to look? Should we change that? Should it be 5 ward councilors and 1 general at large? Those kinds of big elements are out there. We also want to clean it up a little bit. There are some places that over the years have shown to be conflicting. If in one area it says one thing and another it says something different, let's fix that. There shouldn't be 2 ways to process bills in the city. There shouldn't be 2 ways to review really anything. So we're going to ask the commission to take a look at it, recommend some changes, which will go to the voters, we hope, this fall, so that if there are any changes to the election cycle, it could take effect in the next cycle. And so we'll be doing that. At the same time, the council will probably start to spend a little more time looking at the details of city code. Sign law that we really dealt with over a course of a couple years is a good example. And we did an update to include the LED signs that just didn't exist when the code was written, and made a mistake in that writing, and I had to go back just a month or so ago and fix that. Well, we need to take that kind of review into the rest of the code. Taxi cabs, for example. There's how do we react as most cities need to with the rideshare apps, and how does that affect what goes on in your city? How do you assure quality if anybody who wants to drive for hire can just go out and do it? So there's some things there. We've had some real concerns over the last year or two about pets, both in terms of registration and responsibility, to some terrible situations in pet stores and puppy mills and those kinds of things. The state law has given us some more authority in that regard. We should take a look at that. We should be all looking at all these things. Again, really not quite as sexy as hey, we got a brand new marina, but really, when it comes to quality of life stuff, those are the things that we need to look at. So I'm hoping that over the course of the next 12 months, we're going to get to some of these issues and really consider them and spend some time and try to improve the overall code in the city.
And you mentioned that study from a few years back. Is there any type of a push or discussion again about mayor versus city manager, whether the city should re-examine that?
Well, I mean, it comes up all the time. Every couple of years it comes up. Again, one of the things when we ran now a year and a half ago that was out there was when you have a total turnover. I mean, because while I had been a counselor and while Mike Kelly had been a counselor before, really we're 7 new roles here. And one of the things that people want to talk about is, well, how do you assure stability in government? And that's really important. Having some knowledge that can help guide you in your current year from maybe 10 years ago is an important piece. And so city manager comes up at that point. The other side of it is it would be a slightly more expensive government, probably no less political. And so it's something that the commission will take a look at. They'll discuss, they'll have some public meetings with folks and ask, what do people think? And they'll then put some package before the voters. But it is, I mean, it's our contract with the public. I would serve in a government, either one, strong mayor, part-time mayor, I don't care. But it's the people's decision, and that's what we'll do. We'll take it to the people.
I know a couple of issues the council's been addressing in the past few weeks is whenever we have a snowstorm, there's the issue of clearing the sidewalks. It is the law in Plattsburgh that you have to clear your section of the sidewalk, but obviously there will always be cases where, for whatever reason, that's not happening. So is the city trying to find maybe a way to get volunteers or others to help with the clearing of the sidewalks in those cases? Well,
first of all, we created a program this year which Mike Kelly deemed Snow Angels. I think well named and well conceived. Really encouraging people to volunteer to help those who really can't help themselves. Has not been an overwhelming success. What has been a success and what has been going on for a number of years is there are Snow Angels out there. It happens in my neighborhood. I see it all the time, and sometimes it's me. If I'm out blowing my sidewalk, I'll just keep going down the street until I get to the next person who already had their snowblower out. That happens. It happens all over the place. That's nice, but it doesn't really address the raw issue, which is the sidewalks need to be cleaned. Whose responsibility is that? The current law says it is the property owner that abuts the sidewalk. There is no fine in the current law. There is only, if you don't do it after we tell you to do it, we'll come do it and charge you, and we're very expensive. I don't know. Does it get it done? Does it help? I think we need to spend some time to figure out a way to make this happen better. We don't have an unlimited supply of equipment or personnel. So one of the things that we're looking at now is really kind of gathering all of our facts into one place. Like, how many miles of sidewalk do we have? How many of them abut public property? How many of them abut private property? How many of them don't have an adequate median to store snow? A really critical issue. And so we're going to start to build from facts and see, is there some way that we can improve this that doesn't break the bank? We've had estimates of anywhere, to completely clear the streets in a 24-hour period would cost somewhere between $350,000 and $700,000. That seems to be kind of pricey. The process we use now is, we have a priority. The first thing we do is we plow our main streets, then we plow our secondary streets, and then we plow our tertiary streets. When we get to parking lots, we sometimes have to go back to some of these streets and then push the banks back so that they're wide enough for cars to both park and drive down. And then usually we get the sidewalks. Sometimes that's 5 days later. And that doesn't seem to be satisfactory. But I don't know. I don't have an answer at this point, but we're going to look at it.
Also, obviously, when there's a big snowstorm, many of the more narrow streets in Plattsburgh, and there are several older streets, add all the snow, it causes even more problems with cars parked on both sides. Hard for the plow trucks to get through, and fire trucks, ambulances if necessary. There's been talk about perhaps looking at alternate side parking, for especially for smaller, narrow streets like that. Yeah. Is that something that you think will be continued to look at?
Oh, definitely. We actually have some streets where we do have alternate side parking already, and it is working there. But we'll need to take a look at where else to apply it. Keep in mind that I remember when I first came to Plattsburgh, it was just absolute. 1st of November to the 1st of April, no overnight parking anywhere. We've, over the years, and particularly as more and more cars are put into service, apartments or homes used to have one car.
Right.
Now they usually have two, sometimes three. And so we've tried to be, kinder and gentler and say, listen, except for when we need to plow, you can use the street. So we've got some real competing interests here, and we're going to try to find a way to accommodate all of them. But an alternate is certainly a tool. Like I say, we use it in some places. We may continue to use it somewhere else. But I think it's going to be a real patchwork of solutions, because we've got a whole variety of streets out there. So, do we have sidewalks? Do we not have sidewalks? Do we have medians? Do we not? How wide is the street? It's an interesting city to be in.
And so a lot more examination of that, and the likelihood that there could be additional streets where that's enhanced or enforced.
It's very possible. Yeah, I think. But we have to. And the other thing we need to do too is we also need to really take into account, as we look at changing a street, let's find out what the residents of that street think. It is a lot of their life that we're disrupting as well. And while the common good is certainly probably primary in our thinking, secondary thought ought to be, let's talk to the residents and find out what they think.
Good. Mayor Jim Calnon, thanks a lot for taking the time to be with us.
Very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.